everybody knows what the temperature control does, right? So there's two knobs. There's one for spray and one for bake. And so you're going to set your spray temperature, whatever works best for you, anywhere between 72 and 78 degrees is usually where you want to be. On the dry temperature, it says 180. This thing's going to top out at about 170, and then it'll start turning itself off. It has a high limit switch that's inside of it, and what'll happen is it'll actually get to 200 degrees inside the firebox, inside the heater in this guy, and then it'll trip. So I don't know if you guys know where to reset that or not, but we'll go ahead and look at all of those in a bit. Basically, to turn it on, here's your lights on and off. Hopefully this is all on. It gives us our lights. There's heat on and off, so that's kind of an advantage. You can turn your heat on, turn it off, and then fans on and off. I'm sure that's not dry, but anyways, we got spray, and then is this thing powered on?
Oh, there's we can break it.
Okay.
That one.
That's why I'm tripped up.
Yeah, you gotta trip that one.
Yeah, somebody
I
did.
got you.
Oh, okay.
You never turned that one off.
All right. Somebody came by. So we've got a. That's not gonna do us anything. We turn it on. Look what's happening. All right.
Yeah. I should give him a ball. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Should be able to go without the heat. There we go. So
Yeah.
we're getting our lights. We're getting the fan, and you'll notice that the exhaust came on first, and then the intake turned on. So there's a delay. There's a delay time over here that makes that happen. Or it's actually right here. But there's a time delay because we want to start pulling air out of the loop before we start pushing air in. And then we want to have the doors closed when we do this. So when we start, we're not going to draw whatever is outside around the spring within the spring. Okay? A little bit about paint spray booths is what we're doing in a spray booth these days, especially in these downdrafts. This was a big change. I've been around. I was telling you my story about being in paint shops since I was a puppy. The reason is because my dad's paint booth was just a stall in the building that had the explosion-proof lights that looked like mason jars with cages on them and a 200-watt bulb in it. And then he had an exhaust fan to paint on the side wall. And that was his paint. And then, believe it or not, it had heated air makeup that pulled air from the body shop. So, needless to say, if he was doing something big, he would make sure that the guys weren't grinding a lot of Bondo dozens.
Yeah, you can have filters at the front end of doors, right?
Right. That was like the next step. The next step was the what you saw was boxes where you had filters on the door, and it would draw air from outside of the building, and then exhaust it out the back. I don't want to get too far, but I'm currently writing a book about spray booths. I've been on the code committee for finishing processes for the National Fire Protection Association for over 25 years. And the original liaison from the National Fire Protection Association gave me access to all of the codes that started back in the 20s. And paint spray booths really did start back in the 20s. It all started with a guy named DeVelvis who actually took an atomizer that he created for the health industry to be spraying things like antiseptics and moisture into the air. And it was an atomizer. That's what became the paint spray gun. But as I digress. So, get everything turned on. We want to look at our pressure. Now you'll notice our pressure is slightly positive. If it's to the right, it's going to be positive. If it's to the left, it's negative. So, point 1, point 2, you're going to be under the point 1. If you start seeing point 1, it's probably time to change your filters because you're at a tenth of an inch longer. You'll see that just which is a very, very low pressure. But what we want to think about is paint spray booth is kind of like a balloon, and what we're measuring is the pressure inside the booth versus outside the booth. And we want to have that slightly pressurized or at zero. It can be slightly negative as long as you're not too far negative. But we want to be slightly pressurized in that so that we're just not bringing dirt into the spray booth.
Why does it sometimes blow the doors open?
It'll blow the doors open because there'll be like when the dampers change, and if the dampers move quicker than the exhaust can catch up, it'll pop the doors open. So I believe you have a variable frequency drive or a speed control on your exhaust fan. But basically we have, you're going to turn it on, just keep your fans running, and then you hit spray. If it's not in spray, then it should switch the dampers to go into a reserve. It's going to be like a preparation mode. So you're doing sanding operations or doing your masking and your prep. You're getting ready to spray. You're wiping everything down already. That's usually the prep. So spray mode, you heard something click on there. Spray mode then switches the dampers versus switches it so we've got 100% air coming in and 100% air going out. When it's in prep, it's going to recirculate some of the air. So you're not using all the energy all the time. When it starts getting really cold, like around here really cold, probably what, 40? That's really cold. Where I'm from, really cold is 10 below. Denver gets that way every once in a while. And where I did some of the paint spray booth installs in North Dakota, it got 60 below. So, great way to make sure that you got a heat balance at 60 below. So we have it in spray. Once it's in spray, there's an airflow switch. We can turn on the heat, and we can make it actually lit up. I'm seeing on your other lights on. Did you hear the little click?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's the gas train. So you can go ahead and open this up so we can see all that.
It'll open. Close that lid.
What's that? Oh, I got this open. Yeah. There you go. Some keys or something. Got it?
There we go.
Got it? Alright, there we go. So what you heard click was the gas train key. And you've got several things that are inside here. And this is a variable frequency drive. What it's doing is it's controlling the speed of the exhaust fan to create the pressure in the spray booth. So we can increase and decrease that pressure with these knobs. Start with the pressure. So you'll see that it went. See how it went slightly negative when we turned on the burner? Well, that's because hot air is less dense than cold air. And so what happened was now the air is flowing through it, starting to go through the booth a little bit. So what we can do is we can increase that pressure by turning the knob. See how that increasing the pressure, how it slowed down the motor?
Right.
So increasing the motor slows down the fan speed. Decreasing the pressure speeds up the speed. Speeds up the motor. So right now you really just want to kind of run it. Get your burner running when it's cold out. You just want to be the first like 2 or 3 lines on the gauge. Okay?
I mean, this way, the line is
Yeah. Positive.
That's positive, just slightly positive. And then when you turn your burner on, when you come on, you want to let the burner's going to modulate. And it's going to kind of let it normalize in the spray booth. Because if you start, you'll see that I start having problems. Now that the temperature is somewhat normalized, the gauge is staying a little more constant, right? It'll be a little bit out of get to temperature before this thing will really start to normalize. It's also something to remember when you're in bake mode. Although you might have it set for, right now it looks like we're set for about 130, is that right? Yep, a little bit 138, going up on 140. When you first turn that on, it's going to take a couple of minutes for it to actually get to that air temperature inside this rig. Again, we got to wait until we got to bring all of the stuff, the objects in the booth, the floor grates, the steel of the booth, that all has to come up to temperature. So if I get too far out, I'm stop me.
No, that's perfect.
Stop me.
No,
So,
I had no knowledge of that, so that's
what
good.
we're doing with that is, what we're doing with this, or with these two knobs, is we're controlling the pressure of the cabin of the spread wheel. We want to be just slightly positive that first 1 to 3 lines in there. And this variable frequency drive right here is what's speeding up and slowing down the exhaust fan to make that pressure happen. Okay? The clicks that we heard when I turned on the heat was, the first thing we heard was the pilot solenoid opening up. We have a flame guard control here. As you can see right now, if I can get in there, but you see right now it's kind of lit up. I don't know if you guys can see all of that. If I shaded it up. See how that's lit up?
Yeah.
Okay, we got power, we've got pilot, we got flame, and we got main. So what will happen is, this takes about 10 seconds when you first turn it on, and you'll hear the click. That opens up the pilot, and then we'll get the pilot light to come on. And then it'll say that I have flame inside that burner. And then at that point, it'll allow the mains to open up. So these are locking valves, and they prevent the main gas from going into that burner until we've established the pilot. This flame is a safety. The safeguard is there so that we don't have a pilot burning in this all the time. It's an auto ignition. And if you don't have heat in the booth, this guy will be in alarm. There's a reset for it right there. If you reset that, and then it goes through like the 10 seconds, and then it trips right away again, and you reset that, and it trips right again. And then you got to climb up inside there and get to the burner, because there's something going on with the flame sensor. In this piece of equipment, it uses a ultraviolet eye, or a heat sensitive eye. It's a little purple thing. They call it a mini beaver, and it's purple, and it's in the side of the burner. And sometimes a piece of crud will get down in there, and it'll block that, so it won't see the flame. Or sometimes it's been so long that nobody's gone in there and cleaned that thing out. Usually the lens is the first thing I'm going to go after. Another thing that might happen is your pilot tube. When it goes through, it goes into the burner, right back in here. This one's got a nice fitting on it. Sometimes what happens is that pilot tube, the vibration of the heater will start to wear through that tube. And all of a sudden you've got fuel going into the air, but not going to the burner. So it'll drop out the pilot. It'll go into alarm. So if you get an alarm state that continues to alarm trip, then somebody needs to climb in there and clean out the burner and make sure all that's good.
Katie.
I have a question.
Okay, there you
A
go.
couple of years ago, the sprinklers, or whatever the thing
Yes,
is,
yes.
it went off by itself.
Oh, the dry chemical?
Yeah, the chemical all over the place.
I've been around this quite a while, and the neat thing about the dry chemical is they're going to come in once a year and they're going to change the fusible links that are on the cables. This thing's got a cable in this box, come down here, and there's a cable in here, right? And that's under tension. Inside the booth, you've got these fusible links that are in there, and at a certain temperature, those links let go. They melt, they let go. And so you got to be careful. Usually when you have it just go off arbitrarily, it's because the guy didn't put 200-degree links in it. He came in and put the standard 110 links that you would put inside
Yeah.
And so the first time you run it through a bake cycle, it might be fine, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, boom, it just lets go. Also, if they're not changing the links enough, if the fire guys haven't been out here and changed this annually, those links, they wear out too. They move around, and then eventually they let go. So it's a soft aluminum material that's at a certain range that they set that up to where it'll melt. So it should be a 200 or 210 degree link that they're using. The temperature high limit that I was talking about is located up inside where the burner is. There's a blower up inside here. And if you take that door off, you're going to find a high limit and a temperature sensor. So if for some reason you don't, no matter what you do, this doesn't light up, you'll just see the power light flashing, and that's all, and nothing comes on. Sometimes it's the pilot light or the high limit that trips. But I don't know when you guys make that, but it doesn't seem like you're ever going to get there. And that's usually if you got it cranked to 180 and it's 110 outside, and you're just making it too hot.
Yeah.
So it happens in a trip. A couple of the other things. This guy here is for the intake fan. This is the motor starter for the intake fan, and it resets here. What will happen is if it trips, this little red thing will just pop out a little bit, and you can reset that. If you reset that and it starts tripping again, there is a little bit of adjustment here, but right now I would say you're done with adjustment. Because over time, a three-phase motor takes a little bit heavier amperage draw each time it starts up. And it's just the nature of three-phase motors. When they get to be 10 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, they start to take a heavier draw, and you can make an adjustment to it, but there's going to come a point where that won't happen. It trips and resets, well then something's really failed. The motor's failed. Something's gone on with the motor. You need to call somebody out to service the motor. On the frequency drive, this will trip also. The frequency drive will protect itself. If something happens at the exhaust motor, it's going to trip. Same thing. It's going to take a little heavier drive, and you can actually program the drive to take a little heavier amperage draw. If this trips, you gotta turn everything off. Make sure that it's lit up still. You can see that it has numbers. Right now we're running about 56.4 hertz. You see the red light on there? So if this trips, it's just going to give you an overload, and it's going to go right here. It's going to say OL or something. And at that point, you got to turn everything off. You'll see that it'll still be lit up. It should read zeros, or it'll be giving you it'll give you a fault code in the display. So you turn everything off, and then you can hit stop, and it'll reset it, and then you can hit run, and it should come back on. So that's it. Exhaust motor trips. Intake motor trips is this guy. Exhaust motor trips is this guy. Burner trips, it's this guy. Okay. Other than that, we just have some breakers that are in here. Lighting breakers are up on the top. And those are just, if for some reason, usually when you have a lighting breaker trip, what will happen is you'll have like a dark side of the spray boot. And one side of the boot, the lights aren't on. You come out here and just check and see if they have tripped the breaker. And it could be many things. This guy's old enough that it's got fluorescent lights in it, and you might have had a ballast fail, or something like that. Maybe it trips. Today we're using LED lights and everything.
All right.
When I was working at Spray Tech, we first started going to LEDs. LEDs are really, really bright. But if you're old enough to have been very, very dark, right? So it might have been real dark at the bottom or something like that. With the fluorescent lighting, what happened was it tended to expand the light so that you weren't so dark where the shadow areas were, and you could see a whole lot better in the fluorescent lighting. So that was one of the first moves that took place in the main spray booth was lighting after all this stuff in advance. And then when we went to LED, the first ones that we did in Spray Tech was for John Deere tractor, and we were at the dump truck facility with them, and they had a large booth, and the company had us put the LEDs into it, and they were right. You look into an LED, you go blind. You don't believe me? Go stand out in front of an Escalade at night and look right into the headlight. See what happens. Tyler and I spent a whole bunch of time looking at opaque glass, and it's an acid etch process to make opaque glass, and we had like 5 or 6 different levels of opaque till we found it. And we found a glass that was etched just the right way to where we got that expansion of lighting in, like an LED. So that was just something we did, man. Those LEDs, they can be retrofitted into this very easy. The neat thing about an LED, you never have to change a light bulb again. This guy will probably collapse before the LEDs stop working at their brightest level. Whereas the fluorescent light tubes that are in these fixtures, about after a year and a half, maybe 2 years, they actually go quite dim, and you no longer have the brightness that used to be in it. They make an LED replacement tube that's like natural light. Those last pretty long too. The little power supplies that are in those tubes tend to burn out after about 2.5 years. It's not that the LEDs fail; it's just the little power supply that's in there to make the 12 volts or whatever the LED. So, we're taking our control off of our 3-phase. We've got an ignition transformer. Watch these guys; they'll bite you. If you let them, they'll bite you. Up in here is our timer TR1. That's that delay between the exhaust fan and the intake. So if you turn on and the exhaust comes on, but the heater never comes on, this guy might have failed. The other thing that we have up in here is these 2 little black switches. Those are our airflow switches. One is a high pressure airflow and one is a low pressure airflow. And the reason that there was 2 in there is that the time that when this gas train was built, it was a requirement in the standard that if you had no airflow or not enough airflow, we don't want it coming on. And then the other side of it is if you have too much airflow, you're going to start running lean. And when you start running lean, you're going to start creating a whole lot of CO in the booth. You can actually get sick. Well, they found over the years that that's not really a big problem. We're not moving enough air for that to actually take place. I've done a lot of testing with the equipment. The neat thing about what I've done is I've done a lot of scientific testing with heated air makeups. And so I've had to do the bit where I've had to prove gas combustion and all the air speeds and then all the gas inputs. And then the different types of fuel, whether it be natural gas or liquid propane. So there's a level that you're smelling gas a lot, and you come out, everything's on. It doesn't seem like it's working. Then do a leak check. One of the things you can do is shut your main gas valve off and see if that stops. There's a setup on a burner where the burner has a line that comes into the center of the burner and the pilot's on one side. All right? And natural gas has no smell. So they put an additive into it so it smells like rotten eggs and sulfur. And when it's exposed to oxygen, it expands and it makes that smell that says, oh, I got a gas leak. Okay? What can happen is if you don't have a flame rivet correctly inside the burner, and what a flame rivet is just from the pilot to where that main gas is, you're seeing a flame just riveting across the bottom of the burner in the middle of that beam, right across the bottom. If there's no flame rivet in there, what'll happen is when it first goes to high fire, you're gonna have that moment where the gas is gonna go faster than it can be ignited from the pilot, and it's gonna smell like gas for a moment inside the sprinkler. So you've got 10,000, 12,000 CFM here of air. That's 12,000 cubic feet a minute of air moving through here. And you expose that much oxygen to a little bit of this additive, it makes the whole unit smell like it's got gas. So if you're smelling gas, it might just be a setup. But if you're really smelling gas, turn it off. And here's where you shut off the gas, right here. You just turn that valve, just shut it down, just crank it that way. It shuts off the gas. So if you're really smelling gas real bad, that's where you're going to turn that off. Okay? Man, that's about all the safety. That's the operation. So right now we're using the spray temperature, which right now it's set for, somebody was told it's set for 88. So it's a little bit warm. And we should be able to turn that down and watch it come down.
Do you recommend to cool it down before you shut it off?
No, you're never going to be really hot enough if that's a problem. It might be prudent for you to have a cool down cycle on the object you're spraying, because although you may have gone through a cure cycle and you flashed all of the solvents out of that material, it's soft. And it doesn't really harden up until you finally cool it down. So that's the idea of a cool down. So here's where our 3 timers come in. The first one is a purge cycle. So when you first put this thing into pure mode, upside down. Dry mode is down.
Yeah.
So when I switch that to the dry mode, what happens is there's a purge cycle, and this timer lights up, and a little green light came on. It'll turn red right here where it says out when this timer comes out. It's a purge cycle just to let your material flash off. Gives you time. You put it in there, it gives it time to allow whatever. If you put a really wet one on there, it's going to let all that solvent flash out before it goes into the egg. And after a period of time, right now, I think we've got it for looks like about 3 minutes. So we're in purge cycle. You can see that it's lit up here. So it'll delay, and then after the purge cycle, I'm going to go ahead and turn it down. I'll put it back where it was. So now it went to dry. And you hear everything's kind of slowing down. There's a damper inside here that closes down around the burner. The blades are like this in spray, and then it closes down around the burner, so it channels that air through that burner manifold. keeps the burner burning clean. We've slowed down on the exhaust, and what's happening now, there's a damper that's opened up inside the box here, and it's begun to recirculate the air inside the sprinkler. And as it recirculates the air, you're going to see the temperature coming up. We're only to about 105 right now, but the temperature will start to come up gradually. And it'll take anywhere from a minute to 3.5 minutes. Just depends on how cold is it outside. That's really where that's going to be. See, the neat thing about living in Southern California is you really don't have to deal with cold weather. You're not going to be like in Fargo, North Dakota when it's 10 below or 20 below, where it'll take 6-7 minutes for the spray booth to get up to temperature, just because when it goes into recirculation, the ambient air outside, although the burner's been roasting and everything, it's going to be full fire. And here, we're only full fire for a short time. Right now, we're already at 140, 42. And I can hear it. You may not have heard it, but I can actually hear that the airflow is changing because the burner's just shutting itself down. So, now we're in the dry mode. So the first one is the purge, and that's usually set for 3 minutes. Right now, your dry mode is set for, what do you got it set for, 40 minutes? Is that right? 40 minutes? So it's going to go ahead and run. It's recirculating that air. And then also we have a little bit more pressure. What I can do with the dry mode, I can increase that pressure. It's not, there we go. See, I have that same control of the fan. And the fan's running really low. So you might want to make sure you're running at about the first 2 or 3 lines on this in dry as well, because what that's going to do is it's going to help flash off the material, and it'll prevent you from having a thing called solvent pop. You guys know what solvent pop is, right? That's where you've captured the solvents below the clear, and it looks like measles. It's just not red. It's just so. You might want to make sure, I've just made an adjustment there, so that's where the dry comes in. I can adjust that pressure of the spray booth while it's in the dry mode. And so we want to make sure that that's kind of close to wherever your spray temperature is. Once you set that, you can forget it. The only time you'll see that change is when the filters are being changed. Say a year from now, you change out the sealing filters inside the spray booth, all of a sudden you're going to have airflow. You're going to see the pressure come up because it's now all of a sudden we got all the air in the world coming through those filters. And then as they load up over time, it's going to slow that airflow down. I don't know how, usually it's a year, might be twice a year that you're changing out those sealing filters that are inside here. It just depends on what's going on. I don't know how dusty it is around here, but it's pretty dusty in Rialto.
Especially with all the construction going on.
Yeah, there you go. Where I live, there's a concrete grinder on the one side and a concrete grinder on the other side. And my black truck has a really cool look. After about 3 days. Yeah. So I have to wash it again. Like, it needs a wash. Anyways. And down a rabbit trail, I just noticed there's just a whole lot more dust in Southern California than there is in Denver, Colorado. Although Denver's very, very dry. And the driest part of the year in Denver is wintertime because it's on the ground in a white color called snow. All the moisture's down on the ground. And it's very, very dry in Denver. But we don't have the dust that we have here because we're not sitting on the edge of the desert pouring down onto us, and the dust doesn't go all up into the air like it does around here when the construction's going on. I mean, they start running trucks and stuff, and you just see it. You just see it. So you go through dry, and at the end of a dry cycle, it goes into a cool. I'm going to turn this back down. There we go. Switch. Now we're in the cool cycle. It's barely lit up, but it is lit up. We're on this one, and cool down cycle set for about 10 minutes. And the idea of a cool down cycle is it gives it time to flash off the material. Well, you flashed off the material. Now during the cool down cycle, what's happening is it allows that paint to harden up. Because at the end of a bake cycle, the paint's really, really soft still. It is plastic. I mean, what we're still on. I don't know if the lights went off or not. But it should have shut everything down. And I think our lights went down.
The lights go off inside unless you push
Yeah,
the toggle
C1
switch.
is our relay for that. So they should be off.
Yeah,
right
it should be
now.
there.
Okay.
Even though
Just
the
to
toggle
confirm
switch is on still?
Yeah.
Yep. Even though the lights on, even though the heat's
Yeah.
on, even though the fan's on, we went through the cool down cycle. What the cool down cycle does is it's like a master shut off. It turns everything off. Okay. At the end of that cool down, this guy opens all the circuits. So that's nice to know because let's say it's the end of the work week, it's the end of the day, and you just got through spraying this thing. Everything's just the way you want it. You come out, you put it in cure cycle, the dry cycle. It'll run through its cycle, and at the end of the cycle, it'll turn itself off, and you don't have to worry about it. It's shut everything down, and it'll stay that way. Even if you have a complete power down, it'll stay that way. You know, say say there was for some reason the utilities went away and then they came back on. This guy will stay off. It won't restart
Unless you get that.
Until you come back.
until you come back.
The dry switch.
Yeah, until you come back and you go to the dry switch and spray. So there, everything came back on, and I think we
So
popped
the
doors
doors
that
blew
time.
open. The exhaust.
So now blowing the doors open has to do with that pressure bit that I was talking about. And what had happened in here, we were at the end of we'd gone through a cool down cycle and we shut everything off. And when I turned that back on, the heated air makeup came up before that. The delay didn't take place from this timer. And it's because of I didn't shut everything back off when I turned it back on. So if you're done and it's at the end of a cool down, or it's finished a cool down cycle and it shut itself off, before you start it, turn everything off. You can leave that and spray, but turn all this off before you switch it to spray, because it'll skip the time delay between the exhaust fan and the intake, and it'll do what it did. It just opened the doors out nice and neatly for us. Hopefully there wasn't anything shiny out in front of it. Maintenance. Really, the only thing that needs to take place is maybe once a year or so. Somebody should really get inside the burner. And
That's
check
how we
all
have
that
it
out,
scheduled for once a
clean it
year.
all out. When they do the service, they should be going in there and making sure everything's nice.
Right.
Your exhaust stack should be cleaned out maybe every other year, just to get the stuff off of the fan blades and get all the junk out of the exhaust duct. Vacuum out all of the pit. I don't know how much you guys actually spray, but it's a good time once a year to clean out all of those floor grates that are inside this thing.
We had that done. previous month.
Once you get all of that clean, filters, the floor filters are going to depend on how much you're using the booth. If you're spraying an awful lot, then those floor filters can be, I mean, in a collision shop that's doing high production, they're going to change those floor filters every week. I don't know what your volumes are. So maybe you're doing that once a month or once every other month. You're changing all your floor filters. And that floor filter is the most neglected filter in the booth. Also, when you do change this floor filter out, make sure you put it in an airtight bag and twist it off. In some situations, like in government facilities, they want that hauled away. They have that done where they'll actually stick it in water and douse it. And I don't understand this thinking, because when you take an exhaust filter and you stick it in water, what happens is now you've created a liquid waste. Whereas before it was just a dry waste and it could be incinerated.
Heavier.
So, and then yes, it is heavier, and the liquid waste is taken away by weight. So just put it, make sure, if you're having somebody come and do that they're putting it in a plastic bag and sticking in it. If you leave these open and just throw them in a dumpster, they'll catch on fire. they'll oxidize over time with the paint material that's caught up in the filters and whatnot. They'll start to heat up just like a mulch pile, only they get a lot warmer, and then poof, you got a dumpster fire. And it happens all over the country.
Okay.
People are doing this all over the place. You just want to refrain from doing that. If you put it in a nice plastic bag and twist tie it so that it's airtight, that won't happen because the oxygen can't get to it. You know, a little bit, I'm a fire guy. I've been on fire committees for 25 years, and there's this triangle of fire. And the thing that you find out is like rust, like on this cabinet, rust is slow oxidation. Fire is just rapid oxidation, and explosion is extremely rapid oxidation. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's why in hospitals they have all of this extra security on all of the outlets that are in every room that's inside of a hospital, because they have live oxygen everywhere. When you have extreme levels of oxygen, you have the chance of very quick fire, a quick explosion, a flammable concentration to a level where it's going to go poof. So that's just something that we keep that. So make sure these are kept airtight. Ceiling filters, again, depending on your use and depending on what's going on around, if there's a lot of construction and they're digging a lot of dirt, you might have to change it every 6 months, but once a year is about right on the ceiling filters. Other than that, it's just when the guys are servicing, they're going to come in and make sure the fans are clean, make sure the dampers are moving like they're supposed to, and everything should work. You shouldn't have any problems with it. So that's it. Questions?
Very good. Very good.
Hopefully